morning, listeners. You are listening to Uncommon Awareness. I am the usual host of that program, Lorraine Hurley, www.drhurley.net. I encourage you to go to my website and sign up for the newsletter. Today is our second ever roundtable entitled Evolving the Species. And my co-hosts for this program are Dean Lloyd and Am Rosen. And I gave their biographies our first roundtable, and they're now posted on my website. If you go to my website and hit About and then click on the roundtable, you can read more about Dean and Am. But we are together developing this program. You can learn about what our objectives are. And what we do is we bring on professionals, and today we're so fortunate to have here with us two extraordinarily accomplished professionals in their respective fields. They both chose a path less traveled, even among so-called alternative health practitioners. Both are highly specialized, following their initial experience of practicing in their fields generally. This is a little different than heading out the gate as a specialist and reflects a professional that really sought to continually refine and develop the work they did in relation to the people they served. They are among a class of professional we commonly refer to as pioneers, taking on territory not generally inhabited by their peers. So we're really in for a treat. And because we have so little time and so much to talk about, I am actually going to turn this right over. Dean is actually our true host for the program. I am your moderator, and Am is our aficionado X Factor. And you'll learn the format as we go along. As I said, you can learn more about it. First, I want to say good morning to Am and Dean, and then I'm going to introduce Dr. Cook and Dr. Borkin. Good morning, Dean.
Good morning, Lorraine. Good to hear your voice again.
Thank you. Good morning, Am.
Lorraine, always a pleasure.
Yeah, these gentlemen get up very, very early to do this program, listeners. We have Dr. Michael Borkin. He's a medical doctor of naturopathic medicine, and he has developed an international reputation for his extensive research and clinical experience in the areas of hormonal therapies and life extension. Dr. Borkin's emphasis on endocrine and neurotransmitter regulation led to the development of unique, non-invasive diagnostic and treatment protocols that dramatically increases both patient acceptance and treatment. And acceptance is very important. If protocols get too complex, people aren't going to cooperate. Dr. Borkin is the co-founder of Sabre Sciences, a laboratory that utilizes sophisticated liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry technology to provide data that is used to develop treatment protocols that are unique to each individual's circumstances, much more sophisticated than just a laboratory test. Dr. Borkin is a pioneer in transdermal through the skin delivery mechanisms in the forms of skin creams and soaps. And with more than 30 years of clinical experience, he is now dedicated to full-time research. He's the director and researcher and co-founder of Sabre Sciences Incorporated. Considered by many as the father of naturopathic endocrinology, he is responsible for establishing the board specialty and penning the first national board for the American Naturopathic Medical Certification and Accreditation Board. So he brought his entire profession to a whole new level. Then we have, good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Lorraine.
Good morning. I apologize. I'm trying to get through so much here. I'm tripping over my own words.
No, not at all. I understand. With a certain amount of stress, I apologize.
No problem. Our second guest today is Dr. Douglas Lee Cook. He's a doctor of dental science, and he's a graduate of the Marquette School of Dentistry in Wisconsin and served his profession as a commissioned officer in the United States Air Force. He joined his dentist father in the dental clinic where he practices dentistry for the last 40 years. This is in Wisconsin. And, he's what we call a biological dentist, and this is an extraordinarily important field that has evolved, to my knowledge. I don't know how long it's actually been. I learned about it about 10 years ago. And really it's an emphasis on dental health, and it's completely rewriting the way we think about dental health, and it's important to our overall health. And he says, I have repeatedly seen the same experience and variable symptoms of my Index 1 patients with root canals, cavitations, toxins from gingival cervicular fluid, metal and metal oxide and composites, and dental restorations. My 48 years in dentistry, with the past 21 devoted to dentistry health, points to the critical health needs not addressed in our dental schools today. Boy, how true that is. Good morning, Dr. Cook. How are you? Such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for being with us. Boy, I learned about biological dentistry some years back, and I'm just delighted to actually meet you. Our biological dentist in this area retired, and he has not yet been replaced. So thanks for getting the word out. All right, Dean, now it's time to turn it over to you.
Good job, Lorraine, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Cook, can I hear your voice?
Yes, Dean.
Oh, good. I didn't hear you initially. Thank you for being here. We all know someone who has had a root canal, or equally we can appreciate the effects of dental work on our physical and emotional states. And I'd like to get the audience in the know on this topic because it's a confused one for most people. And we'll be discussing the importance of hormones and the relationships to the brain and body. So, Dr. Cook, how I'd like to start out is, would you help us all understand the reasons for root canals and what they do, how they work in the body, and give the audience reasons why the procedure is such a common issue in your practice?
Well, it's really an emotional issue where the dentists say you don't want to lose your tooth, but the end product is an infection. All root canals are infected. And if you picture pulling a weed out of the garden, you'll notice the taproot. That's the main nerve canal in the tooth. But all the little auxiliary fibers that come into the main taproot are the same thing in a tooth, with these little fibers from the nerve that go to the side of the root, and these you cannot fill. So therefore they break down and become gangrenous, and then they affect the organ system that the tooth is related to. It's on my website. I wrote a book, Rescued by My Dentist, which explains how. There's another excellent book out there, Root Canal Cover-Up Exposed by George Meinig, who was the founder of the American Endodontic Society until he found out what he was doing to the patients by doing root canals. And then, of course, that ended his root canal work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dean, may I just make one quick comment, and that is that, thank you, Dr. Cook. The listeners may not appreciate that every meridian in the body is correlated with the tooth, and this is why they can have such far-reaching systemic effects. And I just wanted to clarify that because people aren't really knowledgeable about dentistry.
Yes, and if I may jump in for a second, Lorraine, for the good listeners out there, meridians are the bioelectric pathways. They were originally mapped out in the East. They're used in acupuncture. Dean could espouse upon that a lot. But they have their own connectivity. They're not nerve cells per se, but they do relate to all the organs and glands, and a lot of them do come up through the TMJ, the temporomandibular joint. So if there's problems in the mouth, it can affect transmission up and down the body. Just wanted so people would know what meridian is.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is perfect segue into Dr. Borkin's work because he's done so much work with hormones, and I'd want to get a foundation from him in his work with hormones. And Dr. Borkin, would you tell us what are the hormones and how hormones and protein utilization they reflect the oral health?
Well, in this particular case, the stress hormones or survival hormones, known as the adrenal corticoids. Cortisol is the primary, and most people relate cortisol to the small amount of fat tissue that they accumulate as a result of physiologic and emotional stress. However, cortisol is an indicator of multiple aspects in the body. And if we look at the primary aspects of cortisol, being reflective of inflammation, chronic infection, ongoing stress factors, keeping in mind that the adrenal glands that produce these hormones are responding. They're essentially the barometer for all stress in the body. So anything that's taking place is in one way or another related back to cortisol, and the patterns, not just the levels, give us indication as to where to go look for the source of the physiologic stress. When it comes to protein utilization, we're really looking at all aspects of the digestive system, starting with the oral cavity. So there are many, many aspects in what we do that are completely reflective of the various dysregulation, disease processes, and give an idea of where to go look as it relates to the dental work, as well as that association, as you had mentioned, to the various organs through the energetic medicine aspects of the mouth, as well as the immune aspects of the mouth.
Perfect. And Dr. Cook mentioned the relationship to the emotional stress of just having work done on the mouth, whether the tooth is removed or treated in some way. But the big picture here, also we should lay a foundation for the stress. What is it? And do we, as a culture, perceive emotional stress affecting our hormones, immune system, et cetera?
Well, yeah, you brought up an important point. Stress is not the cliche that most people think about, oh, I'm so stressed out. 90% of what we're discussing is physiologic, meaning that it's emanating from somewhere within the body. That 10%, which is an emotional factor, we're more vulnerable to when we're in a weakened state. You know that when you feel sick and somebody says something or something occurs, you have no buffer mechanism to it. However, if you're feeling good, most things reflect off of you as if you had some kind of force field. And this is the foundational aspect of how we become vulnerable to the physiologic stress.
Wonderful. Wonderful start, gentlemen. We have to take our first break of the morning. Listeners, you are what we're bringing to you is Evolving the Species. We have a couple of extraordinary guests today, Dr. Borkin and Dr. Cook, a biological dentist and a hormonal specialist, and this promises to be a really terrific program. Thank you for being with us. We'll be right back. Okay, listeners, we are back. The program is Uncommon Awareness, and our forum is Evolving the Species. And I don't know about you guys, every time I hear that Power Plucker commercial, my skin hurts, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to listen to banjo music again without that visceral response. But anyways, we are here with two esteemed guests, and because we've got so little time, Dean, the baton is yours.
Thank you, Lorraine. Just hearing from Dr. Cook and Dr. Borkin, I'm imagining all of the physical complaints that come into Dr. Cook's office saying, not to, make little of the mouth, but all the other complaints that they have with their mouth, like back pain or arthritic pain and migraine headaches and all this kind of thing. What I was going to ask Dr. Cook is what comes through, because you're having to sort out through a lot of experience where people are coming from. So if I could get you to give me some insight into what you see and how you're able to sort out what to do.
Well, that's of course, an approach that is individualized and is mainly picked up through electrodermal screening. That's where we can measure acupuncture points. and match the filling material to the energy of the patient. Everything has energy. And so that's where we kind of start and get the mouth cleaned up by putting in compatible filling materials that don't contain aluminum oxide, iron oxide, fluoride, or barium. And there are only a few of those on the market. I've listed them, and the one is premise, unshaded. The shading is iron oxide, which is pretty toxic. And we find the metals in the teeth as the patient comes in have a very big effect on the immune system. It'll cut the immune system about in half. And this is done through blood testing for T4 and helper cells, which help to clean up infections. And when the metals affect that system, of course, you're more open to a lot of health problems that aren't normally related to the fillings in the teeth. And that's where we come in and start with that first. Then we look at infections such as the root canals or where teeth have been pulled and the socket does not heal. This is called a cavitation. And then those have to be checked out and cleaned up. Surgically is probably the best. There are other techniques out there. I haven't found them really successful. But by locating the exact spot within 2 millimeters, it can be done with this instrument called computerized electrodermal screening. So,
excellent. The thing that we're very unaware as a public about what these dental cavitations and infections do to the body, and not to mention the hormones. So you're making the point about the immune system dropping down half, and how you've seen these different substances that are commonly put in the mouth as being a major deterrent to the immune system. That brings up the question, of course, how do the hormones, how do you look at, in Dr. Borkin's case, systemic inflammation or infection? How does that look to you when you have it come through your testing procedures?
Well, basically what we find, if we give the body half a chance to heal, many of these problems resolve themselves, which the body is basically meant to do. It's meant to be healthy. It's what we do to it that causes these unusual effects or implications with pain in organ systems that don't function at their full level. So there's where we come in as dentists. And we can't be putting metal and metal oxide fillings in their mouths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see how this could be misread pretty easily in normal dentistry. Do you run into that pretty commonly?
Well, it's pretty much the standard. Right now, according to my sources, 50% of the dentists are still using mercury fillings.
Holy
mercury
cow.
amalgams, which have a profound effect on the immune system. But one of the biggest things is the composite fillings, which contain the aluminum oxide, iron oxide, and fluoride. These are all toxic elements to the system. They don't match up with the patient's energy, and as a result, it affects their whole system. I think the number one comment over the last 35 years that I've been doing this is the higher energy level of the patient once they get the correct filling place.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Boy, I'm learning an awful lot, listeners. I thought I knew a little bit of something about it, but I'm learning an awful lot. We have to take another break. That was our short segment, but we will return shortly in just a few moments. The forum is called Evolving the Species, and we have Dr. Douglas Cook, a biological dentist, and Dr. Michael Borkin, an expert in hormonal therapies. We'll be right back. All right, listeners, we are back on Uncommon Awareness. The second and fourth Friday of every month, our forum is Evolving the Species with my co-hosts Dean Lloyd and Am Rosen. And I just want to take the time. I know that I hope you're interested in this. Dr. Cook can be contacted at www.dentistryhealth.com. He's also written a book, Rescued by My Dentist. And Michael, you're basically involved in research, but I did find a huge write-up about you on premierhormonebalance.com. Is that okay is this where people can find, physicians like yourself?
No. However, looking for the lab, Sabre Sciences, SABRE Sciences, at sabersciences.com will give you some insight. However, using my name in any search engine will bring up, as you mentioned, a lot of information, including training videos from my physicians. So there's a lot of information out there. Most of what I do, because I'm dedicated full-time to research, is not directly commercially involved outside of the laboratory. So I don't have a website in particular to promote anything from a commercial standpoint, just the research that goes up as we're doing it.
No, that's fine. And I don't want to take up more of our precious forum time, but Dr. Cook and Dr. Borkin, I hope that at some point you will consider being a standalone guest with me on my program. Fascinated by your work. Okay, Dean, once again, the baton is yours.
Okay, thank you, Lorraine. And all right, here's hoping that all the listeners are getting a sense of how these insights we're discussing can contribute to their lives and the betterment of their life. So let's continue with what I was talking with Dr. Borkin about and what he would normally see. This was something we discussed yesterday on hormones involved with what Dr. Cook sees in his clinic. For looking into the medical history and how it relates to these dental issues, what are these patterns that you typically would see, and how do they affect the treatment?
Well, let's lay the foundation for that in the first place. When we talk from a hormonal standpoint, again, the adrenal glands are the equivalent of the canary in the mine shaft. So it's that mechanism that warns us that something is taking place long before it's actually going to create detriment in the body. So when we look at the hormones, we're also looking at other systems such as the neurotransmitter or brain activity. So most people don't take into consideration that there's a direct connection between survival hormones and every other system in the body responding back. So when we look at a panel and we see that there's an inflammatory response based on the posturing or that dynamic that we're looking at, because as you know, we measure when it comes to the stress hormone through a 24-hour period of time. So we're looking incrementally every 4 hours at certain events in the body. You had mentioned the association between the meridians of the teeth, but all of the meridians are associated with a 24-hour biological activity, meaning that certain systems highlight at certain times. We can go back and look at those incremental aspects as far as the time period and give some indication as to where to go look for the physiologic stress.
Beautiful.
Does that make more sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me of when I would hear someone who'd come back from getting treated by Dr. Cook that they had a systemic, arthritis, and that they would have been treated correctly, or you would say that appropriately, how they would be free of pain. I thought, Dr. Cook, you might elaborate on a little bit of what that would look like in some cases. Would people come to you and not even being aware that their mouth was related to things like chronic arthritis?
Yes, that's correct. This patient came in, she was 64 years old, had been looked at by 33 different health professionals, Mayo Clinic, and all the local large hospitals and research clinics with no results from her head pain. And when I looked at it, I asked her if I could use some local anesthetic to see if I could shut off the pain. So I injected right over the 2 root canals that were located in her eye tooth and her lateral, the small tooth next to her front one. And within 45 seconds, the pain was completely relieved. So we knew we were on target. So then we went ahead and did some more measuring and removal of some of the metals, which helped when we removed the root canals to heal. But that was a patient that was just totally amazed and was absolutely, positively sure that I wasn't going to be able to help her. But she's one happy patient.
Yeah, that segues into how much of this is actually contributing to the aging process. And it's not talked about. It's interesting. Am, would you give me just a little bit of your input on this? Because when the hormones go in a downward slide, if you would think of it, the adrenal glands are peaking, your body doesn't go under the stress, or when you are balanced out that way. And we want to ask why the cortisol response is happening.
Okay, let me jump in, if I may, for a minute. And you know, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are getting their mornings started in their various capacities. They may have a tough time understanding where they can factor in this information. Basically, we're shells to produce seeds, to produce other shells. And so we go through our cycles, and we have to go from being a microscopic organism in the mother's womb up to a full-grown person. That requires a lot of growth hormone. Tissues have to be formed. Connections have to be activated in the body's metabolism and nervous system. And you're in an excessive state of cell proliferation. We call that youth. And we're very anabolic. Most people harm themselves but don't realize it, because while we're in this state of excessive cell proliferation, we have enough cells coming in not only to handle our daily output, we're all very busy, but enough to compensate. It becomes like a masking device. In our early 20s, the growth hormones start to slow down. We don't need a bigger body. We've reached full maturation. Now, between about your 20 and 30, you're still progressively in an anabolic state, which means you have enough hormones coming in to maintain the body's ability to repair faster than it's breaking down. We're not talking about with massive accidents or some sort of trauma or infection. But at 30, we start to cross the line. The growth hormones diminish. Between 20 and 60, we lose approximately 80% of our growth hormones. So that now it's, you used to be able to party all night. You're 20, you can be up, and a few hours of sleep, and you're ready to rock and roll again. But all of a sudden it's taking you a little longer to catch up. And as those growth hormones diminish, the repair factor slows down. A lot of times people start to discover problems in their body. They've been there, but the hormones were able to mask it, the activity of the hormones. So a lot of people don't take this aging factor into account. Now, as I said, left to its own devices, the body has its biological cycle. This is entropy. We do our thing and go. But there's also syntropy. And syntropy means, which is what we're discussing in various ways. How do we use our intelligence to work with the body, to work with the mind, to accumulate energy? If you're taking nutritional supplements or watching your diet or eliminating toxins consciously, not just waiting for the body to do it, then you are using that to refurbish the material and accentuate it. We have essentially domesticated the human animal. We've brought it in from nature, and now we have electric lights, and we can move at high speeds and communicate. We have to tell the body how to respond. The funny thing is, our show is evolving the species. That is unfolding and fulfilling human potential, which is far from fulfilled at this point. The bodies, our bodies, can and will adapt, but left to their own devices, they do not know how to do this. So as we become more intelligent, we have to find techniques, as we're discussing now, that will enable the body to facilitate the kind of demands we're making upon it. Am I making a little sense?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect sense. That was wonderful.
It is, and Dr. Cook would probably, he can relate to so many people coming to him with, figure me out. How are we able to determine what's the first step? And that's something that I wanted to kind of segue into, because the audience may think, where do I go if I have some dental issues? And I'm not really sure how to approach this, and when I've got several different problems that are going on in my mouth, how I can pick the first thing to do. Do I pull this tooth out, or do I do a detoxification or get the amalgams removed? Can you give me a little insight into that, Dr. Cook, about how you would approach several issues with somebody like that?
Yes, that's basically what we start with, is an evaluation of the acupuncture points, which are like a wiring system in your house, but it's in your body, and we see what's out of balance and which one are causing the greatest amount of trouble. Then we can match with homeopathic preparations of these different filling materials to see if the main issue is coming from the oral cavity or is organ-related. And if it's organ-related, then we send them off to the appropriate healthcare professional. But basically, we find that getting the immune system up to speed by getting the metals out and metal oxides, we save a lot of time for the health professional in trying to find causes. And that's where we start. Then we go ahead and we look at the jaw areas where there have been extractions to be sure there's no residual infection or pathology. And once we get that far, we see the patient improving as a rule. I wouldn't say it happens to everybody, but generally speaking, it really does a nice job of pinning down where to go.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. Yeah, that is beautiful. And we have to take our, we have to take another break, and then we'll be winding down the first hour of our program. I'm sure we'll get to hear a little bit more from Dr. Borkin as well. Listeners, thank you for being with us. We're called Evolving the Species, and we are going to be returning in just a few moments. Okay, we're back. Listeners, we are winding down our first hour of Uncommon Awarenesses twice-a-month forum, Evolving the Species, with my co-hosts Am Rosen and Dean Lloyd. And we are here with two esteemed guests, Dr. Douglas Cook and Dr. Michael Borkin. And Dean, let's get to it.
Thank you. So Ann was making a point before we went to break. Why isn't the body able to keep up with these demands? And the case where hormones are the issue of helping us determine what kind of effects are being made in longevity or physical appearances, I was going to ask Dr. Borkin, how do these hormones affect us that way in longevity?
And, the basic is that stress is accumulative, that what we look at in a panel is not what the individual experienced that day, what they ate. It is reflective over an extended period of time of repetition. That same stress factor, like I said, most of these are physiologic, such as issues with the oral cavity, dental issues, as well as gastrointestinal issues. From that aspect, cortisol is a primary factor when it comes to the release of growth hormone and relates back to repair. If one's in a state of adrenal dysregulation and it affects cortisol going into the sleep or reparative cycle, then it stops the normal release of growth hormone and interferes with normal immune modulation. So the millions of little workers that come out to clean up our mess during the sleep and reparative cycle don't do an effective job. and what's not done today is not made up for tomorrow. So over a period of time, cells that should live a predetermined life expectancies, such as cells, tissue cells that live 120 days, will be affected and die at 90. We only reproduce these cells so many times in a lifetime. So we have control over a certain amount of our aging or longevity process just by making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and not affecting these stress mechanisms which have an effect on shortening the life expectancy of a cell, which relates back to our own life expectancy.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Cook, did you want to make a comment about that too?
Well, if you can up your immune system, that's one of the key factors in controlling a lot of inflammation and heavy burdens that are overlooked otherwise. And they're usually treated with allopathic medicine, which it helps, but does it get at the cause? And you want to get at the cause of these basic things that do cause the immune system to drop off on us. And we do that by removing the metals, which are a burden to the system energetically.
Yeah, and it's so very common. We have to deal with these different metal issues, and before we get off into all the different ways they can affect you, I just wanted to clarify that when people get any kind of change in their mouth, these, as Am had mentioned earlier about how I have been treating people and seeing people and a lot of information about these pathways that go to the brain through the channels or energy channels. If you can imagine the energy that goes through your mouth going down to your foot. In other words, there would be a tooth that would be affecting the brain that would be affecting the foot. You may not make an immediate connection to that, but if we can find that these pathways are directly affecting the brain and the energy pathways that go down to your foot, you can have these miraculous changes, literally, to the physiology as a result of taking the burden off the body and the shorting out to the brain, like with these metal conflicts, I guess we could refer to them as.
Right. Hey, gentlemen, we have to take a top-of-the-hour break now. It's about 9 minutes, so if you need to stretch, get a glass of water, anything else, this is a great time to do it. Listeners, the forum is Evolving the Species, and we're going to be back at 6 past the hour. And once again, I'm your host, Lorraine Hurley. We've got Am Rosen, Dean Lloyd, my co-hosts. Our guests are Michael Borkin and Douglas Cook. And these are really extraordinarily important topics, so please stay with us. We're bringing you information that is not in the mainstream, but is so vital for you to understand. All right, listeners, thank you and welcome to the second hour of Uncommon Awareness. The second and fourth Friday of every month, our forum is Evolving the Species with my co-hosts Dean Lloyd and Am Rosen. And our guests today are Dr. Doug Cook, a biological dentist, and Dr. Michael Borkin, an expert in hormonal evaluation, treatment, and longevity. And I want to encourage you, if you missed the first hour of this broadcast, please get the archive. We're off to a great start. And, while we're discussing their respective specialties, what's been demonstrated in this discussion is there really is no such thing as just your hormones or just your teeth. Our guests have conveyed exceptionally well the concept of functional or total system care. Compartmentalization, the idea that we have a cardiovascular system or a nervous system or a digestive problem that exists independently of the rest of us, is really an invention of our outmoded, and this is from my personal perspective, frankly dangerous allopathic monopoly. I am so grateful that we have people out there that have forged through and are finding their way to what I call sane, rational, and humanistic care. So there are processes, okay? You can't really think of any one problem in the body as simply being a standalone issue. It affects every other part of the body. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dean, and we're going to continue our conversation today.
Thank you again, Lorraine. This morning we've been tossing about the ideas in relationship to the mouth and the hormones and all the negative effects that can take place if the dental work isn't done properly or isn't considering all these other factors. So what I wanted to do is throw in an anecdote, a story from Dr. Borkin before I bring in Am, because what we want to do is address a variety of different perspectives, our fields. We're all contributing something, right? If I have background in oriental medicine and acupuncture and herbology, and where Dr. Borkin has his expertise in hormones and reading the changes in these hormones, and Dr. Cook has his expertise in being able to identify, the imbalances in these different metals or composites and where infection may be, where it hadn't been recognized before. But these are all contributions. And what I was going to ask Dr. Borkin to do for us is we spoke yesterday about a case that he had been observing, even took a film of the procedure. But just to illustrate what changes in somebody's life when you remove the burden of the body, what takes place. So, Dr. Borkin, do you remember the chronic fatigue patient you talked about yesterday?
Of course, and the thousands of others that we've seen over the years with the same type of story, where after a series of events associated with physiologic and emotional stress, an affected aspect of their mouth, either a chronic infection or some kind of dental work, comes back to haunt us because we become more vulnerable. In that particular case, this was a gentleman who apparently, for no reason in his mind, went into a state of chronic fatigue over a period of 2 years where he was unable to get out of bed, let alone go to work. So he was on disability. I met him at Dr. Cook's clinic, where I was spending some time studying Dr. Cook, and the patient explained to me that they had been completely debilitated. They had numerous complaints. So it wasn't isolated to one aspect of their body and just the fatigue. There were a lot of other presentations. When Dr. Cook removed a cap in his mouth, he discovered that composite cap that appeared to be a possibly compatible material had underneath it a gold crown, and underneath that an amalgam filling. Now, when you mix metals in the mouth, those metals, when in contact with one another, create a certain electrical charge. And Dr. Cook has developed what's known as an oral potential unit, and this measures the milliwattage that comes off of a specific tooth. So when you look at these mixed metals, you find that there's enough energy coming off of these teeth, electrical energy, to operate a small appliance. So in his particular case, as these metals were removed, that constant agitation that had created a multitude of issues started to resolve. The procedure that I observed involved the removal of the second set of these molars. Now, it just happens to be that these particular teeth are on that meridian that affects not only the adrenal gland, but several of the control mechanisms within the brain, including the pineal and pituitary, meaning that the feedback causes disturbances not just in one area of the body, but in a universal manner, affecting every system in the body in one way or another. It's a cascade.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Cook, could you add a little bit on that experience? Dr. Borkin's, described how the mechanism worked there. But could you add from your perspective?
Yes, I know the case, and the patient's first comment was, as we got the metal out of the tooth and had it completely cleaned up, she said, somebody lifted a big weight off my head. So they know what's happening. All you got to do is provide the right filling materials and, of course, take care of their general overall infections in the oral cavity, which are a terrible burden. So this other case that came in from Washington State had terrible head pain for years, and I think they had spent about $80,000 going to different health professionals. And we were able to find and locate the infection in the upper jaw, get that cleaned up, and within 2 days, she was a different person. Her eyesight improved, her hearing improved. She could walk better, she could think better. So you can see it has far-reaching effects. We also have our own in-house commercial lab. When I ask for something, that's what I get, not the next best thing, which is sometimes the case when they send it to a commercial lab that doesn't realize the health potential or effect of different materials. Plastic, like the dentures and partials, contain cadmium. That's a heavy metal. One of the main reasons why people can't keep their dentures in their mouth or their partials, they're uncomfortable because the body knows that these energy fields are not good.
Yeah, and this is a good place because imagine the emotional stress that they've been experiencing while this burden was on them. You would mention that in the beginning, Dr. Cook.
Well, what you do to the body affects the mind through the emotions, the way you position your awareness affects the body. Most people are unaware of that. But it's interesting listening to our guest speaking. You know, when I work with people, the first question for me is, if you have a problem, why is it manifesting in this particular part of your body? Why are you susceptible in the first place? Obviously, if there's inflammation, if there's debilitation, then you have to address that. But this is, if you go back through the history of medicine, all the way back to its inception, it's like there's a leak in the wall. Well, put something in to stop the leak. Did you put the right material in? Is it something that will hold and contribute to the strength of the wall? Will it actually weaken the wall because it's improper use of material? And that's what we're talking about. Not just looking at the symptomology and throwing something in to momentarily arrest it, but finding out where the structural weakness is in the person. There's basically two approaches to health. One is where most people are fixated on, is getting away from the problem. Sure, you want to get away from it, be it physical and or emotional. The second one that's much more viable, and it's really where we're heading, we just have to get in tune with it, is to find out how good you can feel, how safely and effectively all of us can adjust up the ante on our energy and hence mental clarity, stamina. And this happens through playing with the physiology. But most of us don't know our own bodies. First thing we were given when we came into this world. Last thing we leave behind, we wash it, we dress it, we gussy it up, so to speak. But we're strangers to it. And it's a shame because it's the beast, so to speak, needs good master or mistress, as the case may be. It comes down to a question of mind over matter. But then the question in that question is, what part of your mind is directing and interacting with material? Now, most of us think that what we think is what's going on. Our thoughts are just our way of notating, of referencing ourselves, that our thoughts are symbols which leverage our awareness into a relation of form and function. And they're wonderful. The thought of a beautiful sunset on a tropical beach, nice thought. But it's not a beautiful sunset on a tropical beach. Now, below the conscious level, however we think about things, are our feelings. Our feelings are how we respond to stimulus. Something happens, how do you respond? You may be very inhibited, very limited in your experience. You can't respond. No, can't go there. Okay, I can only look at it this much. Or you may be wide open and be able to take it all in and see all the possibilities of it and mix and match as you see fit. But most people are not there. Now, feelings, regardless of what we tell ourselves, we can have all these wonderful ideas about things. People can be patting you on the back and telling you how wonderful you are. But inside you can feel lonely or insecure or inadequate. No matter what we think or avoid thinking about, everything we feel affects the visceral organs, creates tissue disposition. And we are, as we advance, our intellects advance through science, through technology, through lifestyle, well, this discrepancy between what we can see as possible, what could be beautiful to us, and where we're stuck on the feeling level is
hold
the
that.
body. The body is
Hold the thought, Ann, because I don't want listeners to miss anything. We have to take our first second-hour break, listeners, and Ann Rosen is really kind of providing us with the X factor that we've talked about. We'll be right back. I hope you're enjoying the program. I have a comment that I'll make when we do come back. Thanks for being back. You're listening to Evolving the Species, and I just have one comment and one question before I let Am get back to where he left off. The comment is he talked about a wall breaking, a patch in the wall, and here's how I've described it to my clients over the years is, if you have a house whose foundation is slipping, and you don't know this, but you see that floors are warping, walls are cracking, windows are breaking, and all you do is repair floors, windows, and walls, the foundation continues to slip further. What you need to do is establish the foundation, and this is what we're kind of talking about here. The question, gentlemen, is the switchboard will not put through callers unless I specifically say that we will do so. So do you want me to open the show to callers or not?
I would love it. Yes, I'd love to respond.
Okay. I don't know that we'll have anyone else that tries to call in, but listeners, if you are interested in just speaking with any of our guests or hosts, you can call 877-300-7645. And I apologize that I did not realize that the switchboard was put on notice not to put calls through unless I explicitly stated so. So there's a learning point for me today. 877-300-7645, an incredible opportunity to talk to people who are extraordinarily, all of them, Dean, Am, Doug, and Mike, all of them extraordinarily accomplished in their fields. Am, please, go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Lorraine. Well, there's some things I want to make our listeners aware of. Okay, this game of life that we're all inextricably caught up in to some degree or another, half the game is energy, and the other half is consciousness. Now, in health, there are two approaches, as I said, and basically it comes down to trying to get away from pain or moving towards pleasure. Pain, be it physical, emotional, or mental, always indicates a blocked flow of energy. In the physical level, there's two ways you hurt the body, barring trauma or accident or intentional injury. We either don't give it enough to adequately meet its needs, so it can't match it, and in trying to respond to our will, it just can't keep up. It starts borrowing from one organ or gland system to feed the demands of another, which creates imbalance. Or we put the wrong quality of material into the body and we gum up the work. Now, you don't want to be in pain, and that's where a lot of people are at because it's frightening. Pain shuts you down. It constricts your range of motion. Pleasure opens you up. Pleasure, one you're going, no, please get it away from me, no. The other's going, oh, yes, more, this is wonderful. How good can we make it feel? And in all of these disciplines and techniques we're talking about some today, we'll be talking about others in the future, we not only want to see what the problem is and how it's been handled, where it hasn't been handled appropriately, but we want to see what will facilitate our well-being. And that comes back to, as I said, mind over matter. And, you can go through all the motions, you can exercise, take the right stuff, and that's helpful. That's getting away from the problem. But as I said, we've domesticated the human animal, and it's waiting for us to give it directions. But most of us are turned against ourselves. Most of us are at war inside of ourselves between what we think and how we feel. Again, feelings are how we respond to stimulus. The feelings are very interesting and they're complex. They come from a number of different levels. But feelings are irrational, illogical, and unreasonable. You can make perfect sense and have scientific validation for your thoughts, but you can say, yeah, I know that's the way it should be, but I can't help it. This is the way I feel. None of us would consciously choose to aggravate ourselves, to worry ourselves, to pick on ourselves, to torment ourselves with fear and doubt, confusion, anxiety, and make ourselves guilty and ashamed. But inadvertently, we do this to ourselves. Since you're not consciously choosing to do it, but we're the ones doing it to ourselves, then you have an irrational, subconscious part of your awareness, which is fighting with your reason, your desire, and your better judgment. And the body, whether it's your individual body or the social politic, it bears the brunt of that. So no matter what you think, you can think the most wonderful thoughts in the world, or what you avoid thinking. No, don't want to go there. Everything you feel is continuously registering on the body. And if it gets weakened, I think it was pointed out, I like to say you've never met somebody who is full of physical vitality who's depressed. They may be crazy, but they're not depressed. But when you can't keep up with the world, when you're dragged down by pain, inflammation, you don't have the energy to interact, then everything becomes hard. Our bodies, and we're looking at some of the things that derail it. There's another side to this. As we evolve.
Okay. Am, hold that. Yeah, Am, hold that thought. We do have to take this was our short segment, another break, and it'll be a few minutes. Listeners, thank you for being with us today on Evolving the Species. I'm your host, Dr. Lorraine Hurley, www.drhurley.net. Our guests are Doug Cook, dentistryhealth.com, and Michael Borkin, who is a researcher at this time in his history, but sabresciences.com. Okay, we're back from that break, listeners. Evolving the Species has Dr. Douglas Cook and Dr. Michael Borkin with us today, and they did a fabulous job of really helping. This is really progressive work, and talking about how we can really more deeply examine the interrelationship of one functionality of the body to the other, and how we need to treat the body with a great deal of respect and kind of visionary examination. And then Dr. Am Rosen is with us now, providing a part of our program called the X Factor, linking it into consciousness and basically the decisions we make in terms of our quality of life, our state of mind quality of life. So, Dean, I don't know if you have a comment you'd like to make before we let Am.
Yeah, I'd like Am to follow up on that, but before we do, I'd like to, first, do we have any callers?
Any callers, Alex? Okay, thank you.
They're mesmerized. They're taking it all in, which is what we should be doing.
Well, a lot of our listeners actually pick up the archives, Dean. Because of the timing. It's so early in the morning that a lot of the comments I get are from people who have accessed the archives. So.
Okay, well, this is just as good. But what I wanted to bring Dr. Cook and Dr. Borkin in is that as practitioners, we're challenged on the emotional stability of the people that we see. And in Dr. Cook's case, I would imagine that a majority of the people that come to him are in pain or in some debilitating way. And in Dr. Borkin's case, he's got across the board situations. But we as practitioners or researchers in Dr. Borkin's case that direct the healing so the fears don't run the trip. I wanted to get a little bit of Dr. Cook's his experience and how he's had to change his life to accommodate these challenges.
Well, the basic thing is I constantly said to myself, there's a better way of doing this, and we have to consider the patient. The patient is the key factor. If you can help them, they're in turn going to help build your practice. And so what I try to educate them in is looking at an X-ray and showing them what is there. Then, like Dr. Borkin said, we use the oral potentiometer to measure the electrical effect of these fillings, which is displayed out in 3 windows showing the voltage, the amperage, and the wattage. And in this case that we discussed about removing the crown and then seeing the amalgam underneath, the millivolts should have been 10, and they were 360. So it's over 1/4 of a volt that person was experiencing. And, of course, that's what their comment was. Once we got it out, it was like a big weight lifted off of them. But if they can look at an X-ray, the patient can, and I recommend they take a full mouth X-ray to their health practitioner and show them. We have to start educating the health practitioners as to what is in that X-ray. And once they start seeing that, then they can recommend the patient go to dentists who will help them.
Yeah, that's a key thing is our educating the patient. This has been such an issue for me, where we had to increase their awareness of what is taking place, and when they get that awareness, like you've just described, taking this objective data to their practitioner, the patient feels empowered, and that really is our job. And Dr. Borkin, did you want to add to that too, please?
Definitely. However, we should point out to your listeners that Dr. Cook is 82 years young. And when I spend time with him, he runs around like a teenager from 5 o'clock in the morning, seeing patients 4 days a week until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then he's doing his research for many hours after. So he's a prime example of what the integration of all of these different modalities, especially the dental aspect, can have as far as a person's longevity and quality of life.
That's great.
Can I make a quick comment, Dean? I just, passion. I mean, this is really, when there's passion in your life, it drives your life.
And that's a great place to pick up from where Em left off just before the break.
One of the perks of being involved in the healing arts is that in service to other people, when somebody comes in, you're not trying to adapt them to some statistic or some modality. You want the knowledge, the technique, the technology, but you have to look at who this individual is. Where is the comfort level of their dynamic, which is idiosyncratic, unique, and what's in the way of them operating it. But in service to that, you have a legitimate reason for accessing information that it's hard to motivate yourself to do from a strictly vanity point of view. And that's one of the perks of being a healer, and it is very energizing. Anybody like Dr. Cook and Dr. Borkin that love their work, well, that's a reward in and of itself. When what you do to survive is happens to be what you love, you've kind of hit a spiritual bingo, so to speak. But we were talking. I was referencing the problems that people have, feelings, gut emotions. Most people we've inherited a religiousized view where if you suffer enough, well, then you're due for a little redemption. The problem is always been weighted towards the suffering side. Not because it should be or has to be, but it's purely out of ignorance, because we take a moment to catch up with ourselves, but then we go back into habits. And the body is locked into physiological processes, habits of too much emphasis here, not enough there, which affects the organs and glands. If you dump, I have people come into me and they bring in bag loads of nutrient supplements. And first of all, the question is the quality of those, how bioavailable they are, how effective, how well they're put together. But when you start dumping a lot of high-potency nutrients into the body in and of itself doesn't know what to do. This stuff doesn't grow on trees. You wouldn't wander and just pull it like a fresh fruit off of a low-hanging branch. You're giving it very specific, target-specific nutrients, and you have to tell the body what to do. But if you're locked into a negative emotional pattern, fear, doubt, guilt, whatever it is, and your organs have learned to respond in that way, and you suddenly start giving it a lot of things that could help it perform better, you get a stuttering effect, where the body doesn't know what to do, and it's locked into this pattern, yet it now has the wherewithal to do it. The body has to be directed, and most people do not realize that. Once the excessive cell proliferation of youth wears off, most people aren't sure what to do with the body. They were taking it for granted. The thing is, as you learn to take what's been called the subconscious, which is really just different levels of feeling responses, some coming off of the genetic structuring, the physiology, some coming off of how you've been conditioned and programmed through the social developmental process. When you learn to take what's been called subconscious and make it conscious, you can work with the organs and gland systems. You can work with these nutrients and move from just getting away from problems into finding out exactly how good you can feel, how effectively you can work the metabolism.
And just a point there is that it's very often the case where we have to show people what it looks like to be healthy. In Dr. Cook's case, they would come in saying, I've got this problem, take it away. But what is interesting is after the procedure's done and they've been healing, they're new people. They're different people. They've had access to parts of their immune system that weren't available before. And when Dr. Borkin reads, some of these results, how things can fix themselves when these burdens are off them, imagine all the people that are living in the state of worry. They're constantly draining their energy, constantly hung up in the fears that are saying, what if I can't, make my payment tomorrow, or what happens, if I'm not able to chew my food. I mean, all those things that are emotionally woven into us. But the points that you're making, is that having access to either the nutrients that are put into us or, in Dr. Borkin's case, the hormones that should be released when you're feeling pleasure to be healthy, or in Dr. Cook's case, in taking out the burdens and replacing it with an appropriate procedure, appropriate mix of amalgams, or not amalgams, but the composites, then all of these pieces are starting to mesh. In other words, you're seeing the value of each piece that we offer. Dr. Borkin, did you have a comment about that?
We're as different as our fingerprints as far as individuality. From a biochemical perspective, when there's dysregulation taking place on a hormonal level, it affects the body universally, and it affects one specific aspect of the nervous system, that being the neurotransmitters, such as dopamine, perceived as a pleasurable neurotransmitter, and serotonin, which allows us to be able to function in a calm, cool, collected manner in sleep. So when you affect all of these biochemical aspects, it changes our perspective on every aspect of our life. And we are chemical beings in addition to the electric components of the body. And they're all tightly interwoven to such a great extent that, again, when we're not feeling well, we're more vulnerable to the emotional stress factors and those influences around us, where we're a walking invitation to physical disaster, which purely relates to the fact that if you have an open wound, you don't continue to assault that specific area of the tissue without experiencing pain and discomfort.
And Dr. Cook, would you agree with all that?
Well, absolutely. We find it so much in the oral cavity. The burden of infection is far beyond what anything is really brought out in the medical profession or other health professionals fail to look at this issue.
Okay. Listeners, we are winding down our program for today on Common Awareness with our forum, Evolving the Species, and we're going to be taking our last break, and then we'll be wrapping up for a few minutes. But, I'm just listening to the conversation, and really what we're talking about is tangibles and intangibles, and how do we work with these two very unique but nevertheless very important aspects of our living life. Okay, listeners, we are finishing up today's program. The show is Uncommon Awareness. The forum is Evolving the Species. My co-hosts are Am Rosen, LifeGame.com, and Dean Lloyd, Accutone.com. We've had two really spectacular gentlemen join us today. Topics that are just, the public is simply just not educated enough. But what you've really heard introduced thus far, and I'm going to turn it over to you in just a moment, is how do we balance the so-called intangibles and the tangibles in our life? And this is what Am's been trying to help us kind of appreciate, that there's a quality of existence that really can't be defined by, laboratory tests alone. And it is to this end that we are really trying to learn to evolve to serve those individuals that come into our practice and lives. So, Dean, go ahead and take off for the what time we have left.
Yeah, I know. And it's so short, but I'd just like to get a closing comment from Dr. Cook first. Can you give us your feeling about what we spoke about today?
Well, the cover pretty much is looking in the oral cavity. Each patient can do that themselves, and if they're seeing metal, they know there's an issue. Now, how big the issue is depends upon the individual, as you well know. But by finding a dentist who understands that there is an issue with the amalgam, and with the composites that contain aluminum oxide and fluoride and iron oxide, possibly barium. There's also a new product on the market called zirconium, which I have not found to be biocompatible. But these are the issues that, of course, you need the help of a professional who understands these issues. Hopefully we'll get more and more dentists across the United States that will be aware and be able to help these people with their health problems.
And great. And Dr. Borkin, please add.
Nutrition is specific to the individual. We seem to look at nutritional supplementation as if they're shoes, and if an 8 doesn't fit, then an 8.5 or a 9 will. That's not the case. We have individual biocompatibility in many, many ways, and without having some kind of a roadmap, and I'm referring to looking at the hormonal aspects, looking at the neurotransmitter, protein utilization, as giving you some specific direction. And what we do that's unique is that we formulate to the individual. We don't try to take a product that's an 8 or a 9 and give it to somebody who specifically needs a size 8.25. So from a nutritional standpoint as well as delivery standpoint, if the gastrointestinal tract doesn't function, we use the transdermal through the skin delivery mechanism to bypass the obvious obstacle. So nutrition is not just science. There's a certain artistry involved as well, and you need to find somebody who can help to guide you based on your individuality, because what's good for one person is poison to another.
That's perfect. Am, did you please give us your wrap-up of what you were telling us?
Well, let me just point out, there's so much more to say, but health is seductive. if you can be introduced into a better state of body or mind, well, once you've tasted it, even for a moment, you're haunted by the fact that it's accessible to your nervous system. You're never going to be happy and comfortable until that seemingly new high point has become integrated and accessible to you as part of your overall bottom line. Big thing is, not just to say these things, but you need to experience it. Because in the experience that you can change the body, you can change the health, the vitality, the clarity of mind. When you experience this, you realize that changes can be made. Now, you don't have to know enough to be able to work on other people. That's a professional choice where you really have assimilated the knowledge and have the experience to individualize, regard as individual application, which you should. Each one of you should know enough to be able to play with your own body and understand what you're asking of it and what it needs to respond.
Yes, and you know what? We do have to wrap up. Dr. Borkin, Dr. Cook, my deepest gratitude for being here with us today. I thoroughly enjoyed your contribution. Thank you. Am and Dean, always a pleasure. Listeners, on Monday, gentlemen, everyone have a spectacular day. On Monday, listeners, we have Sheriff Mack. We're going to be talking about the 10th Amendment. We're going to be talking about Obamacare. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, but Sheriff Mack will be with us on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoyed our program. We love hearing from you. Thanks so much for being here.